Hey everyone, welcome to the Let Loose podcast, the podcast dedicated to all things Gym Leader Challenge in the Pokemon TCG. I am your host, Jeff Beisch, and we are joined for the second time by super awesome set reviewer extraordinaire. All the hype, all the energy. We got Luke. Luke, what's up, my friend?
Howdy, Beisch. How you doing?
Oh, so good. I'm a little sick tonight. So again, I was telling you in the warm-up, you bring the energy. But I'm here for some set review stuff, man. Stellar Crown looks good with the cards that we're getting, but there's not a lot of them. Would you say
For
the
sure.
same thing?
Yeah, we were talking about it in DMs. I didn't realize just how much on my because I made an article on Stellar Crown and Shrouded Fable all together at the beginning of this month. I did it all in one, and I didn't realize just how much of that review was Night Wanderer until making this PowerPoint with you and getting ready for the podcast. So we've got some good ones. We got some great ones to talk about, but Lord knows that there's very few and far between.
Yep. But again, I think the quality is there, so we got to kind of dive deep into what those cards are, where we think they fit, and of course, new set review coming out. But like Gym Leader Challenge just got a huge shakeup. We got Bannings, Luke, 3 cards that were, I would say, 2 of them were a huge part of what we all do in Gym Leader Challenge. And then one of them was kind of fringe playable, but was probably poised to take a bigger role. And of course, we're talking about these 3 cards on the screen. Our namesake. We got banned, Luke. We got banned.
We did get banned. So do we rebrand?
I was joking with some people about what that looks like. Someone made the joke. I can't remember who it was in the Tricky Gym Discord that like I have 100% name to ban rate. So I was thinking like maybe now we're just called like unfazed facts.
Oh yes, yes.
And then we could go from there. And this, I don't know, rebranding so often, it's just probably not a good idea. Let Loose is really good, like as a name, as an homage to what Gym Leader Challenge was at the beginning. I think we keep Let Loose. I mean, even we could have named this like Amazing Shot or something, and it would have been fine too. But so many good Pokemon attacks and names we could have gone with. But I think for the moment, we'll stick with Let Loose. Again, I don't want to forget my boy Marshall. He's been an important part of all my ups and downs in Gym Leader Challenge. But I don't know. This is huge. First off, the 3 cards are Let Loose Marshadow, which again, bench it. You and your opponent both shuffle your hand and draw 4 cards into the deck and draw 4 cards. Amazing Shot, amazing rare, Raikou, that for a grass, lightning, and a metal energy did 120 to the active and 120 to the bench. And then a card that feels like it doesn't quite fit here, but we'll talk about it, is the Spirit-Born Evolution Duskull. Discard 3 cards from your hand, instantly evolve it. A 40 HP, just little skeleton face. I mean, what'd he do? And those are our 3 additions to the ban list. Right decision, Luke?
Ultimately, yes. I think I'm a little heartbroken specifically with Duskull, just because I feel like he literally never got a chance to shine. And even though the upcoming deck was oppressive, for those of you that don't know, it was going to be using the Dusclops and Dusknoir to some extent, but mainly just the Dusclops from the most previous set, Shrouded Fable. And it would use it to get really, really nasty one-turn combos, either knocking itself out once or twice in a turn, as well as maybe knocking out its Mismagius, which if you knock out, you can draw till 7. Trying to get your opponent to the 3 prize window using Blacephalon. Z-Man really made up that list. Was a great list, terrifying list. And not just that, like I don't even think that list was like public knowledge necessarily to Mahone, but I think just the potential of the card was very evident, and it was going to lead to a lot of potential non-games. And ultimately, like at least currently, we are competitive, right? And so we care about giving like the competitive integrity of the format. But at the end of the day, like we're also trying to have fun. A lot of people either play this on the side in order to either play with other TCGs or just get away from standard for a little bit. And some people are fully delved into it, much like you, Beisch. And so when you have such a wide brand of people that are some into it competitively, some are into it just for fun. There are local scenes, there's money on the line in some places, there's all sorts of things. You've got to make bold and rash decisions. And I think that this one was, albeit unprecedented in the sense of like nothing's even happened yet and we're banning this card. Um, we're banning this card. And arguably Raikou is in like a similar boat, but Raikou at least has a president in the form of Amazing Rare Kyogre, which we'll talk about shortly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, and if you look at how Mahone has kind of like shepherded and herded this format to a certain degree, he's always kind of looked at cards that have broken the rules a certain way. You know, you saw it with Force of Giant Plants, like skipping evolutions, being able to evolve immediately is an issue. So this Duskull, again, fits into that same bill. Was discarding 3 cards enough of a downside? Well, not with that Dusclops. And it gave Psychic something that it never really had before. You always expected Psychic to be strong in the mid to late game, but you never really expected to lose on turn 1 to Psychic. You were like, I'm going to get to draw some cards, I'm going to get to play the game. And now with this Duskull and just like Mew, right? Because now you're doing 5 damage counters on something, and then Mew can clean up something. Like your entire like engine to kind of dictate how you were going to play the game on your side of the field can be taken out as early as turn 1, really before you had a chance to really do anything. And that's where I feel like this was a really smart decision. Again, it breaks the rules. You and I both love the Sinister Hand Dust Noir, which was really playable mostly because of this card. Like, I know your build was running, and I had run it at some point. You run the Wally, so you can go Duskull into Dusclops into Wally. You can get up to the stage 2 in 1 turn, but you already had to do the work of putting all the damage counters. So it wasn't like breaking anything ridiculously. You were just kind of manipulating what you had already done to fix certain numbers. And that strategy has gotten a lot worse, I feel. But again, I'm willing to give that up because I do think that Dusclops Dust Noir could lead to some toxic gameplay. So again, kudos to Mahone on that.
Yeah, I agree. And then Marshadow, I mean, anyone who's ever played a game of this format knows, no, just getting hand disrupted turn 1 is really, really unfortunate. We'll talk about it here in a second, but I feel like this makes that mid to late range that you talked about. Some decks will definitely not mind it too much, but some decks, most notably like Lost Circle, who really need a good number of turns sometimes when the hand just is not handing. Um, not being able to slow down your opponent without the use of a supporter, which ideally for their sake is Colorless's Experiment, um, is is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And then Raikou, I mean, we got 2 cards in this in this stream that were already going to make it very good. I already thought that Raikou was going to be banned by New Year's. I had already had like fully been under the impression that it was going to be banned by New Year's, and like January 1st, Mahone was going to have something. And then the Magneton from Surging Sparks, which hasn't even had a Japanese reveal yet, but it's our promo for the ETBs here internationally, was revealed. It's literally identical, minus maybe HP thresholds or something, to my Lodic, which was the partner in crime to Amazing Rare Kyogre. It accelerated way too many energy, losing 1 knockout in order to get 2 oppressiveness. Now we have Lux Cape, all these other things in addition to the 2 cards that we'll talk about soon in the form of Joltik and Crispin and Turbo Energize. Just energy acceleration, especially in the form of like multiple energy types, not just one. Be it like fire, water, whatever, but getting your grass, your grass, your lightning, your metal, it is significantly easier now, even more so than when Kyogre was legal and it got banned. And now it's easier, and now this gets banned too, and I think it's only fair.
Yeah. I mean, if you played against Turbo Raikou, which I know a lot of people haven't, just because it's not a deck that pops up in a lot of LGSs, at least I don't think. It hasn't popped up as ours. It's a puzzle piece, and like you're the pilot of that deck trying to piece together this puzzle, and what your opponent does has very little impact on what you're doing with that deck. And it was already really consistent because you mentioned the new Magnetone that's coming out. Well, Call Signal Magnetone knocks itself out, puts you behind a prize, lets you play 2 extra supporters. If you find Lieutenant Surge's strategy, which that Magnetone lets you search up the 3 supporters to then combo off with counter energy and maybe Raihan or something else, whatever way you can get that extra energy onto it. And now, Guz Mahal gets you counter energy and it gets you Luxurious Cape. Your Raikou can sweep 6 prizes and you're taking out your opponent's active and their best bench support Pokemon if they haven't had a chance to set up. And you could do this like super early on in the game. I'm talking like as early as turn 2, and it's already like creating these non-games. And the problem I have with it too is like it creates non-games one way or the other, because you either have everything and you win the game, or you don't have everything.
Lose.
Yeah, and you just lose. And it's just like this. That's not the kind of like game I want to play. Like Gym Leader Challenge, I think most of us that are attracted to Gym Leader Challenge like games to go a little bit longer. We like the back and forth. We love the comeback potential that is in this format. And so like when you have a deck like Turbo Raikou to a certain degree, it doesn't quite feel. And I know that that's not why the ban happened. The ban happened because this was going to be happening on turn 2 every single step of the way after we add those 2 other cards to the format. But I'm not sad to see Raikou go. I know there were people out there that used Raikou responsibly. I'm looking at you guys. If you were playing the Mahone Beat Stick Lightning list, much respect to you. Like, people that were playing Turbo Raikou were murdering me on turn 2 quite often, quite frequently. And I didn't have bench barrier, right? It's that argument that we came back to. You mentioned Amazing Kyogre. Not every type has bench barrier. We don't all have the same protections. If I'm playing Psychic, I can go Mew, Mimikyu, right? I can like Mimikyu copy, and all of a sudden I'm Raikouing back, and like the prize trade continues, and we're having a game. Every other type's like, guess we're done. So.
Yeah, and it's not even just metal. You mentioned Guzhala. You mentioned 2 really important pieces of it: counter energy and Lux Cape, or Rescue Scarf if you're scared of that stuff. But it was running a lot of different things. But you've also got Silent Lab. It also gets you the stadium. So even against bench barrier decks, it was just very oppressive. You could commit, let's say you went, maybe you had 2 turns. You played your first turn, they went second. The Raikou player went second. You went and got your second turn, you went first. It was unfortunate you lost the coin flip. The Raikou player is now available. They can evolve into Magneton. They're doing all the shenanigans. You committed one of your ball searches. You committed maybe a ball guy. You committed a Gloria. You committed a Cloud, whatever. You committed one of your decisions to a Manaphy, and unless Guzhala or one of these pieces, in particular Silent Lab, are prized, it doesn't matter. You're still getting sniped. So it was pretty oppressive.
Yep. So again, I just feel like on every single front, I know that people that aren't as heavily invested in the format might look at these cards and be like, I don't really understand why some of them are going. I do think it's the right decision. I think on the whole, Gym Leader Challenge feels like a better place. It feels like a more open place. Psychic is still going to be up there. Lightning's got to figure itself out, and I think that's what we're going to be getting into right now. You mentioned Psychic, and you got a lot of the Lost Zone pieces up here. Tell us about it, man. What you got with this, Luke?
So, I was having a conversation with one of my locals, and she's just recently getting into the format, and she actually really loves Marshadow, and she doesn't understand necessarily the oppressiveness of it. She just really liked it. She liked being able to see more cards. It wasn't even necessarily about disrupting the opponent, although sometimes it could be, and she wasn't like dumb by any means of not using it like that way. She definitely did on multiple occasions, but just being able to like have the consistency of like almost anything in my deck turns into card draw. And she was playing like typical special energy with the twist Psychic, not even like Lost Zone. And we were having a conversation. We were just like, what do I take out for it? And this is basically what it is. Like, what does Marshadow become in your deck? Do you still want hand disruption and you want to be an absolute buffoon and trying to do it turn 1 of the game? Well, by all means. I mean, it's not great. It's less searchable, but there you go. Red card. Cool. I hate you, but it's fine. You're doing the same idea and you have less outs to it. So if you just have it in hand, like, it is what it is. Other options that are totally justifiable are Judge and Judge Whistle. In particular, Judge Whistle allows you to get the Judge back. Pseudo scoop up net Marshadow shenanigans, not necessarily, but a little bit. And also most psychic lists were running scoop up net specifically to use Marshadow again because it was that powerful of it. Actually, really getting 2 slots as a result of this ban in most lists, not just 1. So it's pretty strong. Um, the second portion, which I think is a little bit more relevant, is just the fact that it can become another attacker. I've played plenty of psychic, all sorts of psychic lists, and sometimes it does genuinely feel like, why don't I have another attacker? I'm out of recovery, my recovery is prized, whatever it is. And there's some pretty good options. You guys heard me absolutely lose it over Cresselia last time. I think Cresselia is a phenomenal card. Unfortunately, does not have Dimension Valley synergy specifically for like the typical builds that we're talking about, like special energy psychic, but it's super great regardless. It swings for the 160 or practically unconditionally. But the other option is Mew. I mean, Mew is great. It is a phenomenal starter if you care about it, because it has free retreat. That's the one thing, so you can always pivot into the other things that you want to pivot into. Um, be it Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet's still not banned. I think Wobbuffet without Marshadow is a much less creates significantly less non-games in regards to like the hand state, and now is arguably you can play around it more. Getting judged into out of your rope and Wobbuffet is too much stuff was going on. But you can now retreat if you started me with Wobbuffet, but it also has the ability that it can copy any basic attacker that's on your field, or on your board, on your bench, I guess, because it would be in the active to attack. And that allows you to copy either this Cresselia, but also your Mewtwo, your Necrozma, things like that, and you can just dedicate your energy to it. Now it doesn't have a lot of HP. That's not the purpose of the card. The purpose of the card is just to add you a little bit of consistency. And lastly, it has Encounter, which is great for one energy. Adds a Pokemon. Search your deck for a Pokemon. Add it to your hand. It's just good consistency. The card's super solid. And you may be thinking, oh, Luke, what about my bench barrier Mew? And to that, I tell you, Mr. Mime stonks go up. Psychic has the benefit of being able to swap its Mew out and still run a bench barrier, because two of them have been printed in the quote unquote modern format. And I think right now is a better time than ever for people to really start looking into that, because Marshadow has been a staple for a lot of Psychic decks. I actually started taking it out because I kept feeling like every time that I was playing it, I was getting bricked more than my opponent. And that is pure nonsense, in the sense that it's not like statistically like the point of playing Marshadow, but it was happening to me too much that I was just like, you know what, I can win without this card. And I was. So I've been playing cards like Mew, and it's been great. Lastly, if you're not looking to add more attackers, if you're not looking to add more hand disruption for whatever reason, even though you just lost a very core part of it, it might just not be fast enough for you, in the sense like what we talked about. Lost Circle really wants to be slamming Marshadow down arguably as early as turn one in order to slow the opponent down. You can then go the other route and just add consistency cards in your deck. I just use Acrobike and Trekking Shoes as the most generic ones, just to be able to like dig deep, and it's basically a deck thin. But you can do all sorts of things. Psychic has access to Farewell Letter Unknown, which you can put on your bench. It discards itself. You draw a card. You have all these options in the deck if you really so choose. And I think these are this Psychic losing Marshadow is not nearly as bad as Lightning losing Marshadow, which is what we're about to get into. Or not Marshadow, losing Raikou.
Yeah. No, I get everything that you're saying too. And, a card I've kind of been looking at is the Mysterious Tail Mew. It's just like an added consistency piece. Obviously, you might need to run like another retreat aid with it, kind of like what Jirachi does to a certain degree in Metal. They use a skateboard. You might need a U-turn board, which Lasso and Psychic already kind of plays. So that was a card I was kind of eyeing. And you mentioned too, playing Bench Barrier, Mr. Mime isn't really that big of a loss. Bench Barrier Mew is really good. I mean, let's not lie there. But that's something that I was kind of eyeing as a kind of a straight swap. Stack Attack, who has been dominating like Asynchronous League with his Psychic Lost Zone list. Like he's really good with it. He hasn't really been all in on Marshadow for a while, and he's been playing some kind of like interesting. You mentioned the Unknown. He's been playing that for a while, and like he usually does that before he even thinks about playing Marshadow or something like that. He usually wants Marshadow, I think, later on in the game to maybe disrupt to another degree. And then, he's playing the Mimikyu too that's like has impersonation, which copies a supporter from your hand. And so, like, if you have to play a draw supporter and you're playing that Mimikyu, maybe Lost Zone doesn't have like that big of a dive towards the bottom tiers as I thought it would. So I would encourage everyone, if you have a chance, go check out his list, because again, you'll get to play that draw supporter, and then you can still have a chance to play your Hex to disrupt using that attack, or using Colorless Experiment if you have that attack available to you. So something to think on. I don't, like you said, Psychic is going to have a pretty easy time adjusting. There's just so many options. Like it's just like what is the right option. So it's gonna take a while to optimize, but till then, Psychic's still gonna be winning tournaments left and right. We all know that. And you mentioned it, Raikou is gone, and like every single Lightning list was just wanted Raikou in it. Only crazy people weren't playing Raikou list. Uh, and if they weren't playing it, like maybe spread, like generic spread, wasn't playing it beforehand because there are a couple lists that have not played Raikou and done well. I know you have your spread list. I have my spread list. Dino won NAIC with their spread list. And Plopel, Alex Carpenter at Full Grip Games, who ended up winning it all, he had his spread list too that wasn't running Raikou. So they've got results, but like you just wanted to play the best Lightning list, you were playing Raikou. So what's next step for everyone in your opinion, Luke?
So these are all the kinds of lists and the ways that I think Lightning really goes. I gave a little bit of credit everywhere. Like you got a Lightning Zone list. I also have one. They look different, but like at least 50 of the same cards. So I was like, let's use the one that's also currently on Gym Leader Challenge website. I don't know if you're aware that someone put that up for you, but that's getting up soon, and there's going to be, I guess, a detailed review soon. So there's going to be that. But because I mean, they just banned one of their cards. So as a result of it, they needed more decks, and so obviously, what other way than to look into Lightning Zone? So we on the top left, we've got Lightning Zone, the list on Gym Leader Challenge by Beish himself. The purpose of the deck really is just to spread damage everywhere, primarily with Regieleki, and then trying to get a lot of damage, sniping specific targets with Raichu. You do this by attaching as many energy in from your hand to the Raichu, ideally, with the use of Magnezone. And it has Rain Dance, or it has Magnetic Circuit. It's Rain Dance. It's Rain Dance in a different flavor. Um, I played this list before. I played it last year during season 3 of CBW's webcam, and I didn't end up winning. But it was a fun little test. I did really, really well, things considered. So it was great. It ran well, and then I continued to play it for a couple months afterwards until I just started playing other types. Shocklock is great initially, to my knowledge, created by Grant Manley, but this current list is updated by Schlinky. Schlinky, great job. I actually think I agree with a lot of the biggest changes that have been made to the list. I've played against Shockluck and played it a little bit myself, and yeah, this is just your generic control list. You use this in order to get to a final loop in the game where you are constantly paralyzing your opponent's active. You've already wasted them of all their resources, their Guzma, their rope, and whatever. You are using Lantern Salvage in order to get the proper loop in, and then you're just milling them until the day ends, and they can do nothing about it. It is weak specifically to cards like Iono and N. I've had multiple people locally, when there was this one local Shockluck player, beat him just because they got the Iono. Because you're so close to the bottom of your deck, you kind of just lose to that, because you also have 6 prizes, so you're going to shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 6. Well, if you're salvaging 4 and then drawing into it, that's kind of the whole deck, and then you just lose on bottom deck. So it's pretty bad. But aside from that, it's very, very, very good. Most people don't know how to play around it, and it takes a couple of games to really know what you need to hold and what you don't. And sometimes you're just unlucky, anyways. The bottom left is a deck that I call Shockwave. Most people just know this as your generic spread list. Um, this uses Electivire and Raichu primarily in order to spread damage all over your opponent's board, very similar to an Amazing Rare Kyogre, but not nearly as broken, mainly because we're stage 1s and we only do 50, not 80. But it's very, very consistent. And I've been able to play it to some really good success. I won my locals monthly last month with it. It's really, really good. It takes after kind of just everything that I love about Lightning. It just spreads damage. And then lastly is a list that I created literally just for the sake of this. We were talking about Mahone Lightning and the people that use Raikou responsibly. And this is my take on trying to keep the energy from Mahone Lightning the same. One of the biggest things about Mahone Lightning is that you're using these special energies to meet Raiku's energy cost, but effectively we were playing a pseudo Rainbow Lightning list. So I created a Rainbow Lightning list. I don't think it's necessarily all that great, but it does use both the Lantern, which needs a water energy, which you're using special energy to meet that requirement, plus one extra, as well as the Electivire, which just needs a special energy attached, and you're able to get these really, really big damage numbers, and we're just beat sticking like practically everything. I think competitively, Shockwave and maybe Shocklock are the better ones. I think Lightning Zone has a little bit too many consistency issues with being a stage 2 deck that also just like requires it to do its final game plan. But at the end of the day, all of these decks are, I think, at the very least, can perform, have plenty of room to grow, and I think this is where most decks will tend to go. Because there's just so much strength. There also might be room for Nuzzle. I know we've talked about it a little bit in chats and stuff like that. Nuzzle is the thing about Nuzzle is just that it's so weak. It has so many frail Pokemon that makes its like spread matchup absolutely atrocious. But I mean, it's doable.
I like Nuzzle. Nuzzle's one of the first decks that my friend and I started playing against, and Nuzzle is really cute. And you're using that Electros that when you have 4 energies, you can just plop it down, and all the energies get attached to it. And it's a pretty cool Pokemon, and it's got cute rats. So if like you're into cute rats, try out the Nuzzle deck. I would love to see a resurgence of rat decks. All Lightning is bad against spread decks. Like the best Raikou matchup was another Lightning deck. Like I don't think I've ever put down my Lightning spread deck against Raikou, especially if they got it off early and been like, oh, cool, this will be fine. No, it was almost over immediately. So Raikou being gone actually might help other Lightning types kind of shine for a moment. Obviously, they have to because it's gone. Uh, I did not know that my list was up on Tricky Gym. That's cool. This list actually is inspired a lot by you and by Costella. Like when I was looking to get into a list, I don't like to play the best list. I don't know what it is in me that makes me like see the best deck and be like, I can make it worse. Like that's just like something I want to do. Like I want to play my rogue decks. And so, when I saw you guys playing this list and having some iota of success, I was like, yeah, that's cool. And one of my favorite strategies was, Rapid Strike Starmie in water. And so that's what this list felt like to me in a different type. You have your Rain Dancer, Magnezone. You have a Lowland Raichu, which literally is a better Starmie because it's not energy cards, it's energy. So, like, you could still use Reversal and do 3. So it's a much cooler thing, but your draw engine's Zebstrika. And when you have a stage 2 in your deck and you're discarding your hand every single turn, it's tough. It's tough to do, especially when you need certain combo pieces. So, like, if Lightning had an Octillery, I would think that Lightning Zone would be much, much better. But because Zebstrika is good and because you have to play it in Lightning, it limits diversity within the deck type. That's all I'm going to say.
When I tell you that I've literally considered Magnetic Draw or whatever it is, Electrode in that list, even though it's only draw till 4, just so I don't have to discard my hand. Too many times. I know at the end of the day, like I've played the deck enough to the point where I feel like I can decide when to sprint and when to not. But God, just comparing it to playing water spread sometimes, it's night and day being able to see an extra card off of Octillery. It really is.
And not having to discard, right? Like that is kind of the key. Like with Lightning, it's a lot more difficult to pilot because, like you mentioned, you have to know when to sprint and when not to sprint. I feel like my best turns are when I'm like, I'm not going to sprint this turn. Like when you have that option to not sprint turn after turn after turn, it feels good. And then sometimes you're trying to set up and you're like, well, I have 3 really good cards in my hand, but like I have to get my bench Pokemon down so I can evolve them. It feels worse. So like Raiku's gone. Zebstrika is good, but forces your hand. You lose a little bit of agency because of it. So Lightning needs to figure itself out. I really like your spread list. It's similar to mine. I like the Raichu. I know some people hate it. Like I know Plopel hates it. I really like the Raichu. I'm playing it with a Minim because I can go turn 2 Raichu, which is pretty busted. I'm playing it over the Elekid. But our lists are very similar in that regard. And Shockwave. I think Shockwave is going to be a menace. I think banning Raikou might bring people to a deck that is inherently more toxic. but that can't beat the clock sometimes. And I don't know like what that period of time will be like for people to figure out whether or not shot lock is for them. But I do think that shot lock is the best lightning deck right now. The issue is just always like you got to beat the clock. Get to control deck. We all know that control decks are secretly the best type in Gym Leader Challenge. No one's just playing them because we only have 30, 40-minute timers.
Yeah. I think in the day when you're milling cards and you're getting your opponent to not be able to play the game, uh, singleton format, man, losing your one out or your two outs at absolute most if you have some redundancy really hurts. You only have space for a limited amount of uh what's it called, of recursion in this type of format as well. I run top burner Moltres literally as a alternate win condition, not because I can do it super consistently. Sometimes you can, but in fire, sometimes I just need to pray that I can mill like four or something, maybe five at absolute most, and just, well, four or six, I guess, technically, because of the multiplier, but like just pray that it gets somewhere. Because if not, I know that I'm about to just get Guzma or Bossed, and there goes Zard. And so, yeah, like sometimes that really is just the lines of play, and it's so strong, and that's why Control's probably. I mean, we all know it's sleeper the best. It's just whether or not we want to play it and play against ourselves with the clock.
What I will say is, I'm saying all of this, and Lieutenant Surge's strategy just became available on Twin Leaf, and so for this next Monday tournament, I'm 100% playing Ursaluna. So, just practice what I preach, chat. Don't do what I do. Okay. Well, I mean, Bannings. It's exciting because I know that Gym Leader Challenge is a non-rotating format, and sometimes people feel like bans are a rotation to a certain degree, but like it feels new. Like it feels like there's space to brew again, and like we get that with certain sets. Like when Paradox Rift came out, we were all like, "It's new! Like we get to try new things. There's new strategies that are like coming forth." And so I feel like Psychic is gonna be like a whole different thing. It's still gonna be good, but like I'm gonna sit down against a Psychic player, and I'm gonna know that 7 cards are gonna stay in my hand, and that's gonna change how I play against Psychic. It's gonna change how I bench against Psychic before. Like it's just gonna be so good. Things are gonna change, and I think they're changing for the better.
I agree, 100%.
That being said, let's get into the real episode. We got set review, and so Stellar Crown is coming out. I think is it September? Sometime in September. It's like next week, right?
September 13th.
September 13th. So Stellar Crown is coming out again. We mentioned it. There's good cards, good quality cards. There's just not a lot of them. And so let's just hop right into it. As always, shout out to our friend Justin Basil, just the very best at getting translations and proxies out for us to use and share with you all. So if you have a chance, go visit his website, follow, subscribe to him on YouTube, wherever he's doing stuff. This man is a beast
Twitter.
at getting out. Twitter as well. Just so good at getting proxies out to us and translations so that we can all share and get excited about these sets before they get out. So again, kudos to Justin Basil. The first card is an exciting card, and this is Slowking, Stage 1. Psychic and a Colorless, you have Inspirational Challenge, which is just a really good name. I hope that translation sticks. So discard the top card of your deck. If that card is a Pokemon without a rules box, which everything in Gym Leader Challenge is, choose one of that Pokemon's attack and use it as this attack. We'll talk about that. And then the second attack's not too bad either. 2 Psychic and a Colorless, 120. Respectable number on a Stage 1. Luke, how are you abusing this Slowking?
Abusing is a very strong word. But I think it's gimmicky. We decided to go with Psychic, and after this, you'll see Lightning. Because it's the types that just recently got a shakeup as a result of the ban list. So this might get you guys, your gym leaders, to go and start thinking a little bit more about some of the newer options as well. But how we're going to abuse this Slowking is by doing more than what the energy cost says. Number one, it's Dimension Valley uh synergistic, so you can do this for just a single Psychic. Two, there are ways of getting cards on the top of your deck. Max Revive, Academy at Night. some of these are troll. Not gonna deny it. Like these are super super goofy. But have you ever not wanted to attach 4 energies to Megaton Fall? Now you kind of don't. Have you ever wanted to gimmickly Rainbow Lightning, get out of the way? Rainbow Psychic, my friend, my foe, amazing sword. Don't worry about the bottom line. 150. We're doing it. It's possible for one psychic. I mean, it's troll, but you can do this. It's fun. It's gimmicky. Um, Other aspects, like if you really want to use like more oppressive attacks in the form of like just like lock or whatever, usually those things aren't too expensive energy cost wise, that there's no real point in running this. I think this is just a lot of fun. You can maybe make the case that there might be like some sort of consistency of like, oh, I wasn't able to get um my evolution off or getting into the active or whatever, something like that. Now I can put it on the top of my deck and get it off, or maybe it was knocked out. Now I can max revive to put it on the top of my deck, evolve the slow key, and still use the lock attack. These are potentials, but you're still devoting an X number of cards, arguably a high number of cards, in order to get this off consistently. And I don't know if it's necessarily a good level of consistency.
Yeah, I kind of looked at this card. I was like, it's cute. Like, let's be honest, it's super cute. And then I started thinking more. I was like, like if you're just playing like good cards like Giratina, like you get to discard the Giratina, you get to use that attack. It does 130, and then you get to put the Giratina back on your bench and ping. Like that's not terrible. And then I started thinking, there's like that Ranunculus, right? That like looks at the top 8 and like puts any Psychic Mon that's there onto your bench or something like that. If I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, from a couple sets ago. Like, so if you're playing like really gimmicky, like one of stage twos in like your psychic deck for like a ranunculus build, you could like do it with the slow king. Like, it sounds super fun. Like, when you pull it off, you're going to be super hyped. Are you going to walk into a cardboard warriors, I should say webcam into a cardboard warriors tournament and win? I don't know. We saw birds do it. Like, birds got second place in a tournament. Snorlax was a bird, but like it's it's still possible.
Terrifying, terrifying.
So, I like it. It's cute. It's fun. Play it. And let me know what your builds are like. So, Psychic, Psychic, Psychic looks fun. Less fun. Maybe fun.
Less fun.
Maybe fun. Is this Lightning card. It's really good. And it's Joltik, 30 HP, 1 retreat cost, weak to fighting, like all Lightning cards tend to be. And then for 1 colorless energy, you get 4 energy for 1 colorless. So you get to search your deck for 2 grass and 2 lightning energy and attach them to Pokemon in any way you like. I mean, thank goodness Raikou is gone, right? Like, this is what we were all worried about, was this Joltik not only charging up Raikou, but also charging up like the Electrike, which you have here on the bench, which could have been like changed into it. So tell us more about this Joltik, Luke.
So this Joltik, let's start with the preface of the fact that a lot of lightning attackers that are around the 3 energy threshold tend to have 1 colorless in their requirements. Now, are they good attackers? That's a different argument to be had. But in the, like, for instance, like the rainbow list that I was talking about, neither of those really synergize with this card. That's why it's in it. But despite the fact of that, a lot of the other ones do have one colorless, which allows this basic grass energy that you're accelerating to really see value. This electric in particular has the ancient trait, not a rule box, but has the ancient trait, Omega Barrier. It basically means that so long as it's on the bench, your opponent's supporter cards, or maybe it's just trainer cards, periods that I don't actually remember, have no effect on it. They can't gust this thing up in order to knock it out. So if your opponent goes and knocks out whatever it is that you're accelerating to, somehow also do that the next turn if it's been a slow turn to your Electrike. This allows you to play swapsies. You can play Thornton, you can play Ninja Boy. If it was knocked out or otherwise discarded, you can Thornton straight back into it. The turns in play, everything stays the same, so you can immediately evolve if it is an evolutionary Pokemon. And then you've also got Ninja Boy. Ninja Boy, if you never manage to get it out, can just bounce itself out of the deck, kind of like a ninja, over on top of a Electrike, and you can play it. The last thing is that also, like, it's good. It's good. It's the best 1 energy accelerator in the format. It's better than Mew, than Shining Mew, even. And Lightning has a couple of these like weird gimmicky ones. Like one, I have locally a person who plays Boltund, which is one lightning, and then you can search your deck for one lightning and put it, or two lightning and put them on your Pokemon any way you like. He does that all the time. He saw this Joltik and he was like, why am I playing Boltund? And I was like, you shouldn't be. That's just the reality of it. But it also gets to evolve into this guy of Galvantula. I talked about it last time. It's good in grass spread. It's good in jump bluff. It's great. I've been playing with it. It's absolutely nuts. It makes the water matchup arguably free. But hey, you want another free water matchup? This thing knocks out a lot of things that are just sitting on the bench if they don't have Mana Fear, if you're running Lab, because it applies for weakness and resistance for what it's worth. And it's the same one colorless energy. So if you started the Joltik attack off with one of your basic grasses that you're now committing to the deck, and then you decide that you want to evolve into Galvantula, that's fine. It literally is a perfect one-to-one translation. This card's super nasty, has a lot of potential. I haven't cooked with it much myself just because I was cooking Raikou. Raikou got banned. I'm over it. But, you know,
Do you put this card in like a spread list? That's kind of where my brain's been at because I'm a spread guy. Like I want to play spread in every single type. Whether it can happen or not is the case. But in Lightning, it's very reasonable. And you mentioned that Lightning, colorless attack cost. And I've been running Recycle Energy in mine for that specific reason because it's just so good. It bounces back to your hand, double Dynamo to reattach the Recycle Energy. Well, this Grass Energy kind of works that same way. You got Electivire that's got Lightning, colorless. You've got Regieleki, Lightning, colorless. And again, that grass energy isn't going to fall off after you've done Terra Spark. So I do think this Joltik might kind of like see its way into some of these other lists that we talked about before. You know, I'm running a Molga in my uh Lightning Zone list. I think a lot of people are. It's got free retreat, it's got a call for family attack, it's reasonable. I think this Joltik might be a reasonable swap too. And then like you mentioned, that double threat attack from the Galvantula. It's like after a Regieleki attack, it can clean up. After 50 from Electivire, it can clean up. You can put those damage counters so that your Raichu can get some work in. So I do think this Joltik is going to see a lot of play. People are going to test it out. You mentioned Shining Mew, and I always loved it when my psychic player threw down a Shining Mew because I always knew I was getting a free prize. Like 30 HP, it's gonna give me a free prize, and it's just turbo energized, right? We got Shining Mew that doesn't give up a prize anymore in the form of turbo energized. Well, this is two turbo energizes, so it's probably worth the prize in all honesty. Um, that's it. It's better than Mew, but still, I'm going to be looking at this like I'm going to be playing Hitmon Bros. I'm going to be playing some other form of spread deck, and I'm going to be like,
oh, I'm licking my lips.
yeah, please, everyone play Joltik. It's good. So good.
My Kyurem is about to do 30 everywhere, and that bad matchup just suddenly becomes free.
So poor Joltik, but it's probably appropriately power leveled, right? You're wasting a turn, you're giving up a prize, you're putting 4 energy into play.
You're also putting grass energy into this list. Like it's a matter of that space too. It's not just specifically the fact that it's the Joltik. It's the Joltik in the package that has to come as a result of it that makes it arguably pretty reasonably power level. There might be someone who ends up cracking it, but right now I think it's good. I think it's right there.
And then, like, another thing that has to be stated, like, if you're putting this Joltik up to attack on turn 1 going second, you know what you're not doing? Zapdosing. So, like, you know, there's that too. Plus, your Zapdos gets a little bit worse. 1 lightning energy. Now your deck is full of grass energy. Are you going to be able to hit that turn 1 lightning attachment like you were before? So, again, there is a downside to playing the Joltik, but there's so many upsides. I expect people to cook with it. I'm going to be cooking with it. And it really pairs well with another card that we're getting in this set that we'll talk about later on. That being said, I had to include this card. I think it's hilarious. I don't think it's good. People are going to play it though. And I really, really like the design of it. So Pokemon has this like idea in their head that like lightning Pokemon hit hard and just get like KO'd almost immediately. And so like this Electivire is really funny for 2 lightning energy. It does 220 damage. And you see certain damage outputs like cards on Thunderous here with Gigantic Bolt. So 2 energy is 140, but then it does 90 damage to itself. So it gets knocked out by like a light breeze on the comeback. But Electivire has a really interesting effect of an attack, which is your Pokemon can't attack the next turn. Like every single one can't attack. And this is actually really interesting for standard when you think about it. Because if you're doing like 220 to a 2 prize Pokemon, and you're able to take that KO and get 2 prizes, and then you're missing your whole next turn, you're kind of ending up even on the prize trade onto a certain degree. Like you're just giving up 1 prize to taking two. GLC is bad, but like sometimes you just need 220 damage at the end of a game. Like, I don't know, Luke. Tell me how bad this card is. I know it is, but tell me how bad it is.
When I first saw this card, I thought, wait a minute, this is okay. This is gimmicky, but Pokemon Ranger. And then I had to remember exactly how Pokemon Ranger actually works, and it made me so sad because Pokemon Ranger is an effect on the player. This is an effect on your Pokemon and on your board, and that's actually a very important distinction to my knowledge. I'd have to actually look up the ruling. I didn't even bother because you put this on the slides today, and we did not agree to this slide. But um, Pokemon Ranger, to my knowledge, is an effect on you. This stops things like ADP's extra prize that it takes, for instance, and expanded. It's and ends up a bunch of different things that affect you as a player. Oh,
It removes from player and Pokemon.
or replace. Okay, never mind. You can gimmick this. You can gimmick this if you want. You can Electivire, Pokemon Ranger, Lightning Strike, a Vicious Seeker, Pokemon Ranger, run it again. That's the only way this card gets played. Next slide.
Again, I put it up here. I think it's an interesting design. I kind of like this design. Don't play it, but I do
Don't
like
play
the
it,
design.
please.
But if you're looking to play a cool Electivire with Pokemon Ranger, do it. Do it, chat. I dare you. This next card really intrigues me. I don't see myself playing it, but again, it's a really intriguing space. I really like it. So we've got Ledian here, 90 HP, stage 1, free retreat, weak to fire, like all the grass Pokemon are. 2 colorless energy attack, 70 damage, which isn't affected by resistance or any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, or weakness to that fact. And then glittering star pattern. So when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve, you basically get to switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active if it has 90 HP or less. So talk to me, Luke. What you feeling with this card?
One very important part about this card is that it says 90 HP or less remaining, which I don't think there would have been a weird way of making it so like the base cost or base HP of the Pokemon had to be 90 or less, which is great. Like it's good, but just the remaining is very important because there are plenty of decks that can then start kind of abusing this card and getting the most out of it. I think truthfully it fits well in these cheap attack lists that are able to attack fast, sometimes attack as early as going first. I'm looking at you, Jumpluff. I've been absolutely donked by you before in the past, and I know it'll happen in the future. Um, you can use this Ledian to gust up very, very vulnerable cards on your opponent's bench. And you can take multiple knockouts as a result of knocking that one out, and you can either get more damage onto a second one that they promote, or you can just guarantee that you're going to take out the one problematic one, and then you're going to take out something else that they promote because they don't have anything big enough to take another spinning attack or another do the wave in the sense of like these double attackers and Jumpluff and Diplin. But as well, you get to gust up something that might be more so in your range in the form of Vespiquen or Lokix. Especially Lokix, I think, has some potential here. It reads that if this Pokemon evolved from Nimble during this turn, it does 100 more damage, so it does like 130 for 1 energy. Super, super solid. And this all becomes a little package in and of itself. I show Roserade, I have Scoop Up Net, and I have Devolution Spray there as well. The Ledian and the Roserade can be scooped up. You can put the stage 1, the Ladybug or the Roselia back down after using them, so the Scoop Up Net gets multiple uses, or not uses, but multiple use cases, better said. And you can do whatever it is that you need during that turn. And Devolution Spray allows you to do the same thing with these, and it doesn't work as well with the low kicks because the Devolution Spray on the Nimble will not then let you just evolve right back into low kicks. The Nimble has now been into play for a turn. But if you swing once with low kicks, next you're swinging with Vespiquen or some of these other attackers that you have, and you Devolution Sprayed that turn, then the next turn you can evolve into low kicks and do the whole thing again. As well as having the synergy of being able to do this with the Roserade or Ledian. So I think it is very good. I don't think it is super good. I think it is very good, specifically in this type of like shell. I think it is going to catch a lot of people off guard. It's a gust on an ability that can be reused. That's usually a pretty good sign to me.
When I saw this card, I immediately thought, like, so easy to get rid of an Octillery because Octillery has 90 HP, weak to grass. So, like, this Ledian takes the KO. So that was the first card that popped in my head. But
No,
like,
it doesn't. It
oh,
doesn't do weakness.
dang it, you're right. It doesn't do
Yeah,
that. So throw a muscle ban on Ledian and then do the
there it is.
damage. But you
I
could
even
also
think about muscle band with these cards. Wait a minute. Oh, it's so nuts.
yeah. But that's the first card I thought of was Octillery. Like, you're gusting that up. Obviously, Drizzile on turn 2. If you can knock out the Drizzile before the Inteleon comes down, always a good idea. You already mentioned Roserade. So many evolving basics have less than 90 HP, and they're so key to your opponent's game. Everyone is playing 90 HP stage 1s because they're level ball searchable. So that 90 HP or less is very relevant in this format, especially for evolving decks. I mean, you're like, what are you hitting in Colorless? Like, Skwovet? Like, there's going to be some matchups where this Ledian is a little dead. So something to think about. But 70 HP is going to clean up some things, especially if you're playing like an Elusive Feather build. Sometimes you're missing KOs because of that damage output. Well, maybe your Ledian with, again, that 70 damage is enough to take an early KO. And you don't really mind it getting KO'd either, because if you're playing like Revitalizer, you just get it back and do it again if that's something you're interested in doing. Because again, that effect on evolution is so strong that it's worth it to get it KO'd at times, right? So something to think about. Not sure where it goes. I've been off my more, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here? My more low-costed grass builds. I'm back into my Meganium deck. I'm back into like classic Rillasaur these days. Maybe it's time to get back in. This Ledian is the kick I need to do it. Fire? Well, I don't think last set
It did not.
review we mentioned anything about fire.
And now it gets 2.
Yep. Now it gets 2 reasonable ones. It's also interesting when you and I were making these slides. I didn't have the fire ones down, so you were like, "Hey, make sure you go back in and change the fire ones." And I'm colorblind, red green colorblind specifically, so I like had the green on here, and I was like, "That looks right, right? That looks right." Well, ended up making sure I had to double check and make sure we had the fire down. So we do. We got the fire background. But let's talk Turtonator, which I think I'm saying right. Turtonator.
Turtonator. I think it's Turtonator.
Turtonator is what I'm going to say. Just rolls off the tongue. But Turtonator basic, which fire needs more good basics. You've got an attack called Ring of Fire, which is 1 fire and 2 colorless, which does 50 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned, and they can't retreat. Reasonable, but 3 energy for that effect, not super great. This second attack is pretty interesting, though, especially if you have something in play here. I'll let you talk about, Luke. 2 red, 2 colorless, Inferno Onrush. Again, just such good attack names. 180 damage. This Pokemon does 60 damage to itself. Talk to us about Turtonator.
I think that this card fills a very similar, if not identical, role to Tapu Bulu in the most recent Jungle Beat / Rillasaur decks. I call it Jungle Beat. I think it's a better name. I'm gonna say that until the day that I die. But our Jungle Beat lists. In that, man, we need sometimes something that can just like hit over that wall, man. Sometimes you just can't. For whatever reason, life just spits at you in the face and you just can't do it. 160 when our best attacker is Entei. That requires 4 energy on the card. 3 times 20 is, I can do that math, surely. 6 times 20, 120 plus 20. Yeah, it's 140. So you need another energy on it in order to even get that 160, 180 range. This does it for 2 fire energy, so long as you have a Burn Brightly on your field. Now, this is as easy as attach Magma Basin, Welder, Blacksmith. Fire has plenty of acceleration. That's not any reason to not run this card. Unfortunately, there are a few downsides to this card compared to how good Tapu Bulu is. One, 180 damage. Not nearly as good as 220. That's just math. Two, it does 60 damage to itself instead of 30. Don't know why, but sure. Three, 140 or 130 HP compared to 140. So it is an inherent downgrade to Bulu. I actually think the Ring of Fire attack can be pretty clutch, depending on if certain instances in the game where you realize, oh, my opponent has already used their Guzma, their rope. They're probably running out of switches. Maybe I can Ring of Fire them in order to like get an extra turn. So I think that aspect of it might make it a little bit better on like an attacking role. But at the end of the game, same or at the end of the day, the same way that I said like Bulu being 140 but effectively 110 HP doesn't really matter because every deck's trying to hit 130. I think it's the same case with Inferno Onrush on this Turtonator. It doesn't matter that I'm doing 60 damage to myself. I'm getting one shot anyways. If the opponent is playing well, if the opponent's deck is built well, and they're aware of how important that 130 magic number is.
Yeah, does the 180 number really matter? Like, because I'm thinking, like, Tapu Bolu is not KOing a Wailord who effectively has 230 HP, right? Like, that's over 190. To me, the next mark is Wailord, right? When I think of, like, the magic numbers in Gym Leader Challenge. So, like, the 180 actually KOs Torterra because of fire weakness. So when I think of like the next important number that I want after 160, it's usually 190 because I know that Torterra exists. So I do think that Turtonator doesn't necessarily get that big of a damage, what's the downgrade to a certain degree. It's just, I mean, Charizard is so much harder to set up than any of the grass accelerants just because of all the onboard grass lookup. So Turtonator, is it going to be online as often as a Tapu Bulu is? I don't know. And that's where I'm interested to see what this looks like. You know, there's a Typhlosion that has, if you attach any energy, it becomes fire energy. So like your DCEs become fire energy. And I'm in meme mode, everyone, in case you guys were wondering by like all the things I'm saying. At our last podcast, Zach and I talked about brewing, and I've just been in meme mode since then. So don't really listen to what I'm saying unless you're into the memes. But that Typhlosion would be pretty cool with this card. I just want to find a playable Typhlosion. I'm a Gen 2er at heart. I know I say Gen 1 sometimes, but Gen 2 was peak Pokemon for me. And I just want Typhlosion and Meganium and Feraligatr, and they're so close to being playable. Typhlosion's probably the worst of the three, and this Turtonator makes me hope.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm a big Typhlosion fan as well. Working with that Typhlosion, then I immediately cut it because I'm just like, I want to win as well.
You gotta win. I mean, the meme
I
is
gotta win
fun.
at least sometimes.
Yeah. You're not winning a lot of games with that Typhlosion, but you're having a lot of fun, I think. Fun wins.
Yes.
Next card on our fire adventure is Salazzle. And a theme might be some toxic cards tonight. I don't know if this card is super toxic, but it's got some toxicity to it. And so Sudden Burn, which is actually, again, another great attack name. Like, Pokemon is just killing it with these attack names. But your opponent discards a card from their hand for double colorless. And if it evolved from Salandit, they discard 2 more cards. So a total of 3 there. The second attack hits that magic number that you talked about, Luke. Flamethrower, 1 fire, 2 colorless, 130. You do have to discard an energy, but again, a reasonable attack on a stage 1 for some utility, but you're playing it for that first attack, I think. How are you going about this card, Luke?
So you see some cards here. Ultimately, I think this is really, really gimmicky and not that great. I think the only decks that are really using it are like pseudo fire control lists, not necessarily fire mill. A friend locally has been using like Pyroar that has to have a fire energy attached into it in order to gust up an opponent's Pokemon, and I think he's like over the list now because it's just like bad. But we were trying to make it happen, and this could maybe fit in there as a potential attack alongside Odor Sleuth, Heatmore. Both of them were using double colors attack cost. But yeah, so you're using 0-6 Machinations, maybe Hand Trimmer, and you're just making their hand super, super tiny, if not absolutely zero. And then you can Devolution Spray this on the turns where it's not getting this attack off. Hopefully you've gusted something into the active so that your Salandit isn't necessarily in jeopardy. And then the next turn after that, because of like we said earlier, Devolution Spray does not get, you don't get to immediately evolve back into it. Then maybe after that you can go and do the whole shenanigans again. I don't think it's like super, super great, but I think that if you really want to make 0-hand games for your opponent and you're a sadist, you can use this card and you can use Delinquent and you can lose Lieutenant Surge's strategy and you can start doing some really disgusting things.
Yeah, builds like this always have a little bit of a downside to them because if you can't control the top of your deck of your opponent, then you're still giving them a chance to,
To find the out.
to find the out, right? And so fire doesn't quite have that. We've seen it a bit with psychic, with like the Gothatel, I think, that can control the top of the deck. So this does feel a bit of a meme, and it doesn't feel like a competitive meme. So if you're just doing it to make your opponent have a bad time and then you still lose, you might want to think about how your locals view you before you run this Salazzle. Again, I know we all want to have friends and talk to them, so maybe wait until there's a little bit more support and fire for a full control list. I know we've got the mill list, but I think when you have full control fire, pull this card out and people won't hate you as much for it then. Hopefully people will understand your meme, but unfun memes are the worst, let's be honest.
Agreed.
Next card. I actually really like this card. And it is Dreadnaw, which is actually one of my least favorite Pokemon. It's just bargain bin Squirtle. Like, if we're gonna be honest, like, I'm probably getting some haters out there, but I do not like Dreadnaw's design at all. But it's a good card. So the ability is Impregnable Shell, and so if your opponent's Pokemon would deal 200 or more damage, prevent it. Just prevent that damage to this Pokemon. And then the attack is actually pretty reasonable too. Triple Colorless. It does 80 plus 80 more if this Pokemon, or sorry, if your opponent's active has any damage counters on it too. So again, reasonable. You also have like a Greninja pre-evolution, what's it called? A Froakie that can put damage counters on things. So like you could kind of set up a good hard crunch here and there. So tell me about this card, Luke. How are you looking to utilize it?
First off, this is my wall breaker. I think every spread list should have a wall breaker. The only list that doesn't really run a wall breaker of mine is Psychic, and even then it technically uses Gallade, which can wall break. Every spread list needs a wall breaker because sometimes Snorlax gets slammed on the field and you can't do anything about it. This is my wall breaker. And on top of that, it's really freaking good. It makes the lightning matchup not as scary. There are potential absolute win games with this card as a result of just how it works with lightning. Almost every single relevant lightning attacker that does single target or does damage to the active hits over 100 damage. Multiply that by its weakness, and it's 200 plus, preventing it completely. This results in your opponent having to attack with something weaker. This can look like Tapu Koko with 2 energy, swinging 20 around, which is 40 on your active, and that's totally good and dandy. That's where these tools come in. Luxcape makes it super, super huge. It makes it so that if they're trying to get the one shot to 40, they literally can't. It's going to be prevented, so they have to take the multiple turns. But also, Pot Helmet is like low-key kind of sleeper on this card, specifically for the Lightning matchup, because, okay, you're swinging 30, you're swinging 50, it becomes 100, yeah, like, unless you're literally swinging 50, then in that case it becomes a 2-turn knockout. But if you're having to swing 40 on, like, your stupid basics or something that you just, like, do not want to, but you're trying to get over this wall, you're going to be doing less and less damage. This Pot Helmet plus this ability is going to be doing a lot of work into this matchup. Additionally, there are a couple of other cards here. I brewed myself a Palafin for Alligator list, and I have been testing it effectively with a local, and he's been playing it for months now. And it is one of the most terrifying lists I've gone against because I like playing big and bulky things sometimes, and it just doesn't let me play that. Like, if it's tournament, I can't bring that because he's bringing this most likely, and it terrifies me. And this card says no, you don't get to do what that core deck wants to do. On top of that, Whale Lord, if it has a special energy on it, it does no damage. They have to either discard the special energy or find another attacker, which is really difficult. They've already committed 3 water energies onto this thing. You can just sit there with this thing as a wall in the front and trying to see, and even Torterra, like if they have 4 Evo presses on, they can, or 4 evolution Pokemon that are Evo pressing for 200. Well, no, they're not. Now, you still die to Hex, you still die to a bunch of other dumb stuff, but I think it's super, super good. I think it's going to be fun to play around. I think it makes the Lightning matchup pretty okay. It's not great, but it makes it a little bit better. And if you ever get to a position where you have like Dreadnaw plus Pot Helmet / Lux Cape only in your active for whatever reason, you're running Scoop Up Net. Maybe you can make this happen in water. Your Lightning player might just scoop because you're doing too much damage.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of funny. Like the way I've played water into lightning before, and Zebstrika has come up as like the win all in that matchup. And yeah, Zebstrika does what for a lightning and a colorless, it is 60, right? So like that plus muscle band is like maybe lightning's only way to take care of this in one hit, because Zapdos doesn't take weakness into account. And then everything else is just doing too much damage. So that is kind of hilarious how that works. It's kind of like a built-in weakness guard to a certain degree, and again, I really like that. It's also like great, like you mentioned, like great to like these Wailord matchups. So often you've kind of picked off Wailord deck's bench, right? And then they've made sure that they haven't overbenched and presented you with those other prizes to win the game, and you've got to get through this Wailord, which they're able to heal continuously. So now the Wailord is just hitting this Dreadnaw, which it can't damage. Like this is just like it's like a Godzilla movie, right? You have like a giant turtle versus a giant whale. Like you just have your 2 giant monsters. One can't hurt the other, and the other one's just chipping away at the legs. So I kind of really like that, and I kind of wonder how that will work out in the meta going forward. You mentioned this is your wall breaker in your spread list, and my water spread list is Palafin, which you have on the list here, which that 210 damage is great. And I really like that first attack, that jet punch attack in my spread list too, is like a way to help put damage on the board for something like an Articuno blindside. So, but this Dreadnaught's kind of cool. I wonder if, like, I was playing Strawberries Wales list that was running Slowbro. I wonder if this is just a straight swap, and I kind of like change how I do things in that list going forward with this Dreadnought.
Yeah, I think that's cook. I used to run Palafin. I ended up making it Articuno plus Blindside because I had just the space for it in that list, and Articuno was the pseudo wall breaker. But then I went effectively 0-3 at Knoxville Regionals, and I decided that I'm not like it's my defeated child. I hate water spread right now. I need a reason to come back to it and actually give it love, and I think this Dreadnought might be it.
Only one thing gives me the love I need to play water spread, and that's Aqua Shower Krabby. Krabby is my favorite, as you guys know. I'm a little crabby myself, so that card is a bonkers. And by that bonkers, I mean I like it. No one else should. Moving on to fighting, we have Rhyperior here, which is a stage 2, which in fighting can be tough, but this card's strong. Real strong. And so we've got the ability Wide Wall, which is as long as your Rhyperior is in the active spot, whenever your opponent plays a supporter from their hand, you prevent all effects done to your Pokemon in play. And so that is very similar to this Articuno here with the Blizzard Veil, which basically does the same thing as long as it's in the active. But you get kind of the added bonus here of a good attack. So fighting, double colorless, 180 damage, which again is one of those magic numbers. And you get to discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So you might not KO the Wailord, but you might stop it from coming in for 240 next turn if you can get rid of that energy. So Luke, talk to us about this card. How you feeling about it?
So I made this slide if it's not apparent by anyone. I think it's hilarious. I took a Pokemon Fusion sprite and smacked it into that because it's effectively what it is. Actually, this Rhyperior's ability is a little bit better than Articuno's. It's not by that much, but it's actually a very important distinction. It says done to your Pokemon in play, whereas Articuno says your benched water Pokemon. So this also stops it from happening to Rhyperior, which is pretty interesting. I believe there's a card maybe called Rhyme, or maybe I'm thinking of Chantal. It was recent where it says like switch your opponent's active. Technically, that would bypass Articuno. Obviously, as a result of switching the active, your opponent gets to pick. You get to pick anyways, so they're not getting the immediate gust effect. but this doesn't get moved either. It's literally a wide wall, and himself is included in it. And then the drill run's super solid. I mean, double colorless, you're gonna see another double colorless attacker, or maybe it was even two, also in this list regarding fighting. And there are a couple of fighting cards that do have the double colorless cost. Fighting just is the same thing as always. It just doesn't really have the support to like make these things super consistent. But if you manage to get it off, if you really like Rhyperior, dude, screw it, man. Like this card is really solid at the very least. If nothing else, like it's solid. And the day that fighting gets support, this is gonna be something that if you don't know the card pool, you might get sprung up on one day.
It's always funny when a fairy card outclasses some of these more powerful cards. And I know it's not up on the screen here, but there is a Rabambi that can just sit on the bench and stop all effects of your opponent's supporters. And so I do have to bring that up that these cards are just worse versions of Rabambi if we're going to be completely honest here. But I do like what you said about this Rhyperior. It will be good maybe one day when we get to that point. It stops Hex. Like once fighting has
Yeah.
abilities, it stops Hex. So we just got to get those abilities first. And there's definitely no way you're running this plus Colossal plus Garganackle. Like there's already too much going on. So uh, one day, fighting players will be there. All right. Next card, and I love your little Haktua meme here. We got Diancie, and this is a really cool, funny card. And so for one colorless energy, it's doing the special refraction. Again, just so on point. So it's 40 times the number of special energy cards attached to your opponent's Pokemon. And it does say card, so double colorless is only going to count as one. And the second attack is fighting and colorless. It just does straight 60 damage. What are you excited about with this card?
I don't know if it's evident. I love one energy KOing my opponent's Snorlaxes. I don't play fighting too often, but I might be slotting this card in just because I don't want to see Snorlax. Even if your opponent has double colorless plus an energy in play, that is still 80, and then 80 times 2 is 160. And how much HP does Snorlax have? Ooh, 150. I love it. I want to kill every Snorlax. I pray to God they don't have a cape of any sort of form or weakness guard energy attached to that thing. But aside from that, we're eating good. All right, we're eating great, and I'm gonna spit on every Snorlax like it's Hawktwa.
Let me tell you about this Minior. If you haven't seen that
Yes, I
Minior,
know the Minior. Yeah,
okay, good. All right, again, you get
but now you
to
got two options to it.
let's just be killing Snorlaxes with one energy and fighting. You know, that's just an entire deck. You'll never lose to Snorlax, but I doubt you'll win much else. All right,
Yeah,
this card, I know Pellet's out there listening. Pellet is really excited about Phalanx as a card. This was probably one of my least favorite gens to play. I don't know why. I think I was just in a weird spot in my life where I wasn't quite as much into Pokemon when this version came out. I think is this Silver Pearl? Is this XY? I can't even remember anymore.
this is Sword and Shield actually.
Sword and Shield. Okay, all right. So a little bit more recently, but Phalanx was not high up on my list. This card is pretty reasonable. One colorless energy is going to give you Link Formation. Really good setup attack. It's kind of like Call for Family. Get two basic Pokemon, put them onto your bench, shuffle your deck. It's Call for Family. And then the second attack doesn't really have much use in Gym Leader Challenge, but I think you're doing most of this for its first attack. You've got Simultaneous Attack, which is 30 plus. If you used Link Formation, you do 90 more damage. So is this going to survive the first turn attack? Maybe. And then maybe you'll get to add another attachment and hit for 120. Luke, how are you feeling about it?
I think more so it's just the best Call for Family that that fighting has. Regigate's great, like, but even then, like, we've kind of moved past using Giga Impact on some lists. Um, some lists are still running it. Some lists are saying, "Nah, I don't really need it." So I mean, this is just solid. Like, if you really want a decent starter, it's Air Balloon synergistic. Unfortunately, not one retreat. It would be great if it was one retreat. But you get to search for your two basic Pokemon, and then the next turn, if it hasn't been responded to, which sometimes your opponent doesn't have it, you go and say, "Okay, now I have an option. Do I go and search for two more basics, or do I swing for 120?" And actually, a lot of things are weak to fighting. So am I swinging for 240? it's like decent. It's like honestly like super super solid. I don't think it's like really really great. The fact that it's two colorless is also really great for like colossal decks because it can still use the fire energy if it just happens to be what's in your hand. Um, and if you are running a double colorless build like I alluded to, this card can also utilize it. You can attach the double colorless just for the link formation first turn, just so that you have it if it just happens to be in your starting hand, and then you still have the double colorless requirement for simultaneous attack. You can swing for 120. There are not many call for family cards, especially in fighting, but call for family cards, period, that are able to do this easy 1-2. And sometimes you get these things stuck in your active, and so you're either using the card strictly for call for family or you're using strictly as an attacker. Like that's kind of how that dichotomy of cards works, or you're hoping that it gets knocked out. This can kind of do both, and I think that level of like roll compression can be useful for some deck builders out there. I don't think every deck's going to run this card, but I think someone's going to find a nice niche for it, and they're going to be happy that Mr. President Pikachu decided to print this card.
Have to agree. Yeah, again on the surface, to retreat, it's got to be in the active. It does do a big chunk of damage. I don't know if this is a card I'm going to try in fighting, but once we get more setup oriented fighting decks, this will probably be at the top of a lot of people's lists. I know that a lot of people right now are running like Carbink. There's like two Carbinks that are pretty good. One that gets you a supporter, one and a stadium, and one that gets you like any 2 item cards. So I think like you have a lot of good setup options. It's just whether or not on that follow-up turn you can get them out of the active and get into your game plan. And so this Phalanx kind of like mitigates that to a certain degree by being a reasonable attacker. Like it's not just stuck in the active getting you more basics. It can literally get in there and take a prize for you while you're getting set up. And if you're playing a Colossal build, right, you get your guys on the bench, you're hoping this Phalanx gets knocked out. It's going to put that energy in the discard pile so you can accelerate it onto something else. So Phalanx, yeah, I think we should give it a try. I haven't brewed around with it enough too, but again, Pellet, when you get a list, share it with us. We all are waiting for Phalanx fighting to take a badge somewhere. Another card I made you put on here, but I do want to bring up that literally after we messaged and talked about this, the person that I'm streaming with on Thursday night was like, "Oh, I'm putting Raging Bolt on my Dragon list." I was like, "Yes, please." So there are Raging Bolt believers out there. Luke, I think you might be in the minority here. Whether or not you're wrong is a different question, but people are getting hyped on this Raikou that we can now play because Longnet Raikou is not banned. So Raging Bolt here is lightning and fighting energy, and Raging Thunderstorm is why I'm excited. It's 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each energy attached to this one. So it's automatically 60 because you have to fulfill the attack requirement, and then you can scale it as the game goes. And then the second attack is pretty reasonable. It's the same energy cost plus an extra colorless, and you do 130, which is a magic number. And the great thing about all of this is it's an unconditional basic in dragging. Like I hate Drampa so much. Drampa is one of my least favorite like dragon Pokemon. Like that card, it can be good, don't get me wrong, but it's just very conditional, and like what you have to put into your deck to get it to work is great. This, you just kind of need energy, and if you can get 60 to the bench on turn 1 going second with just a DDD attachment, like you have very little ways in Dragon to disrupt your opponent's bench. Like how you're disrupting your opponent is through Guzma, through boss KOs, those sorts of things. Hand disruption off the searches of Dragonite Fast Call. But this gives you like a real opportunity to hit something on the bench. And then of course, if you can get 3 energy, 90 is KOing a lot of important things on turn 3. Like it's just going to scale as the game goes. And 130 HP is way better than the 120 HP basics that Dragon was playing before in Drampa and in Druchigan. Because they're just Guzzlord fodder. That's what I ended up figuring out this last week. Fair. So there's a lot of upside to Raging Bolt. I saw this card and I was like, oh, I want to put it in an ancient dragon list, because you guys know I have an ancient fighting list that I'm really excited about. But there's only one other ancient dragon that's in the dragon type, and that's this Koraidon. And it's not terrible. It has 130 shred attack, which can be relevant. And the first attack is only ever going to do 60 damage for 2. I do like Seda as a card. I'm with you, though, Luke. Again, we talked about this in our Discord message. I do think there needs to be one more ancient dragon for things to get good. But tell me, why do you hate Raging Bolt, even after all the wonderful things I've just said about it?
Look, if you want to run Raging Bolt and like that's fine. Like that's fine. But at the end of the day, like I think it requires either too much to really get it going, or it just is never really going to be enough. There are the games where you are going to turn to start Raging Bolt. I've got either Guzma Hala or Colress's Tenacity, or just have it raw in my hand, and I'm gonna detach DDE and I'm gonna snipe something for 60. Great. And then the next turn, I'm attach another energy to it, and I'm a swing for 90. Great. Aside from Turbo Raging Bolt, and I swear to God, if that actually becomes a thing, and we're going from Raikou to Long Neck Raikou, I might eat a sock. Um, you know, outside of that, and it not being responded to, I don't think it's that great of a card yet. I think Dragon has a lot of a bright future up ahead of it. There are so many potential cards. Clearly, they're printing Dragon cards and they're printing it with stuff like this in mind. I don't think it's the end of the ancient toolbox at all, and I think that it's not the end of spread either for Dragon. I'm still praying for a Dragapult. It's only a matter of time. Um, it's just a matter of what you can do for this. But if you want to cook, here's my cook. All right, you got Raging Thunderstorm. You Hurricane Charge with Dragon Knight. You Turbo Blaze with Reshiram. That's like 3 energy right there. All right. You DDE, that's 4/5. You Crispin or Raihan or whatever that same, or Sada, that same turn, that's 6. Hey, that's 180. Now, can you do arguably the same thing with Zygarde if your opponent has less prize cards? Yes. Is it less commitment? Yes. But you know what? You're the one who put it on the list, not me.
You're hearing it here first. Raging Bolt Dragon, according to Luke, the best dragon deck. So thank you for saying that.
100%.
So yeah, I'm excited about it. Other people are excited about it. I'm going to be cooking with this card. This is the only reason why I want to play Dragon. Like, I'm not a Dragon hater by any means. I think Dragon's a very strong deck. I've just never been really excited about it. In Gen 1, you've only got Dragonite, and then I think Gen 2, they didn't really add another dragon, so you just have Dragonite. And then I never really loved any of the other dragons.
You had Kingdra, but it can't be played in this format.
Yeah, that's fair. So give me Raging Bolt, which is just Raikou, right? It's just Raikou, but it's a dragon. So I want to play this card. Next card, I'm super excited about because there was a dragon deck that's very similar to what I think this build is going to be. So we've got a new Melmetal, and Melmetal cards have always felt almost good enough to play. Like they feel really, really, really close. And so I think this Melmetal might be the best, but I don't know. So 2 energy, double colorless cost here. Beat down does 50, but it's the second attack that matters. Metal, colorless, remodel axe. It's going to do 250 damage, but before you deal damage, you have to discard a tool. If you can't do that, the attack does nothing. Luke, how are you making Remodel Axe a viable strategy, a viable attack in Metal?
Well, you see Melmetal right there holding 2 cards, and he's holding U-turn board, and he's holding double colorless. And I was trying to get big like muscles right there and like to put it over the card, but I couldn't really manage to do it. It was like the last like 20 minutes before we got on that I thought about. I was like, okay, it's not worth it. But he's got big arms, and these arms are holding a tool and some energy. U-turn board says that if it is discarded from play, it has to be in play. It can't be in your hand, but it can be. If it's discarded from play, it goes right back into your hand. This allows Remodel Axe to be used multiple times again for only the one deck like slot. Now, obviously, Metal also has a bunch of other tools that it wants to run, but these are less wanting to be discarded. Obviously, you've got Floatstone because all of our things are super high retreat, but you've got these other damage reduction tools, and we don't really want to be discarding those. It's really the U-turn board that we're wanting to discard for this. But worst case scenario, like if you need the 250 swing, you can still attach those. It's not like you're out of tools if you don't have U-turn board, if you just can't find U-turn board, or if it's in your prizes or whatever. If it gets lost vacuumed, which is the killer of that in theory, although you'd be discarding it. So really the only way that you're ever getting U-turn board out of your hand is if it gets disrupted, which is the downside. You can get Marnie and Ionode, it goes to the bottom of the deck, you got to find it again. But this is really, really good. I picked up double colorless because now we've got a good number of double colorless attackers. One really, really good one with Remodel Axe over here. In Metal, Are they super easy to power up? No, but hey, Kling Clang is there. Kling Clang, when you evolve it, you can accelerate 3 energy. That gets you somewhere going. And then you've got these double colorless energies in order to really start doing the rest of the work. Kaparaja does 240 damage if any of your Pokemon have damage counters on it. Well, the Aggron Seismic Rift does 240 to the active and then 30 to the rest of your bench. There's some synergy there. It's a lot of stage ones, a lot of stage twos. No one's saying this is the fastest metal list, but metal's really never been known for being fast either, um, outside of like light metal. So if that's the case, and you're just wanting to play a little bit of a slower, maybe grindier, maybe super big, heavy swingier play, this deck could be very, very good. And I think it's ultimately going to be a meta call. Like if you've got, I feel like a lot of people in a lot of local scenes, everyone kind of starts with their Whale Lord Torterra shenanigans. Like everyone just has their starter decks because they're the training wheels decks. Well, if you've got an event and you just really want to win, Metal, my good friend, has your name right under it, signed, dated, everything right there.
This card's really good. I mean, like, I have not really dipped into metal too much recently, although I did get smoked by some Caparaja list, the new Caparaja that
So
has like
good.
a 4 energy attack cost and basically stadium locks. So I think metal is in a really good place right now. Double colorless, and I know we're about to get to this card that I think just kind of changes the game for how decks are built. And I know Heatran isn't up here, but I think like Turbo Energize and this card we're going to talk about really just like really are going to force you to a certain degree to play cards that have more colorless in their attack cost. So the fact that this has that has huge damage output, which again, Wailord Torteras are cards you're going to see all over the place. And it just synergizes with a card that's just really good. Like U-Turn board is good already, especially if you're playing, one of the Jirachis that are part of your consistency engine. So I think this is going to be good. Again, I know that you have this build around with it, but I'm tempted just to put it in like some normal list, right?
Yeah, might be
You've got
decent there.
yeah. I mean, you put a metal on it with Bronzong. You can Metang, maybe potentially some more energy. Like, there's a lot of different options. Plus, you attach for turn, and you can power it up in one turn. So, I like this metal a lot. Really excited to brew with it. And that's all I'm going to say. I think metal is getting a big boost here.
I just wish it would get a big consistency boost, and I wish that it wouldn't all be on Bronzong.
Oh, Bronzong. Now, another really cool card for metal is this card, the Archaludon, which we've been waiting for a while, right? We've had the Duraludon for a while, and so we finally get its evolution here, and its evolution is good. Again, like stage 1 metal might be a thing. So Steel Bridge, each of your Pokemon that has any metal energy attached has no retreat costs, which they're thick boys. So you're going to need this card to help you pivot in and out. And then the attack is just really good too. 2 metal energy, a colorless. It does 160, which is one of those magic numbers. And then that Pokemon, Archaludon, can't attack. But it has free retreat. So, Luke, tell me about this card in your opinion. Where does it fit into the metal card pool?
So I think it's interesting. I think you can build decks around it. I think ultimately, like this style of metal is just really slow, and then sometimes you just lose to getting gusted, your opponent having too many options, particularly like things like water, where you can just drizzile, search for boss, and then knock out one of your important tool. One of your pieces on your board is really really tough. But this is comparable to Metagross. Now, Metagross has no retreat cost. Period. Instead of having metal energy on it, this makes it a little bit easier to manage, and it evolves from your Metang. So if your Metang is already used, it's gotten its run of mill use, which is it's an argument to be had whether or not you ever want to not have Metang on board. But if you ever just feel like that's the case and you really want the free retreat, you sure can. And it has a decent attack actually. I've been locally annoyed by a leg quake one too many times, so it's also decent. But Archaludon is definitely better in a lot of different ways. First off, it's a stage 1. Second off, it's got more HP. Third off, it does more damage. So all these things are good, and you can combine this with Metal Transfer Bronzong. Unfortunately, you're losing Metal Links, but you can attack, for instance, with Iron Blaster, not get knocked out because you have a huge HP pool. You retreat. retreat into something else that you're wanting to attack with. Doesn't really matter what it is. And you've already done the retreating aspect of it. You had the metal energy attached to Archaludon in order to get the no retreat cost. Now you just metal transfer it right back onto whatever your next attacker is. And then if you have a switch, screw it, I do it again. And I'll Iron Blaster again. So um, it's a good card. I've played this type of metal list in the past before. I just feel like it's a little slow. I don't think we're really there yet. I think it needs some sort of more consistent energy acceleration than Matang. I think the deck wants too many pieces, so you can't run too many energies to really make Matang super consistent. You lose Bronzong because you're having to run this Bronzong. Magnazone's too much commitment. Where am I getting my acceleration for all these beefy boys? That's kind of where I sit on this type of list. But maybe one of the cards that we'll be talking about here soon kind of fixes all those problems, because you can kind of mess around with it however you want.
Zamazenta is where my brain went to, because like Zamazenta is Metal's best attacker, basic, hits hard, damage reduction built into it. And conditional attack is the issue. And so with this Steel Bridge ability, though, like that condition kind of wears off a little bit because you can retreat it back. You don't have to miss that KO. Oftentimes you'll see Metal players going like, here's 220. Well, then your opponent,
Fails the KO.
Yeah, strategically fails a KO potentially. And then you're hitting back for 100, or you're having to retreat, discarding energy to do that, right? So I really like this Steel Bridge ability. I'm hoping. I want Metal to be cool again. And I thought it would be cool with Reverum. I thought it would be cool with Matang. And you just don't see it getting as much love. Maybe it will. That being said, Colorless continues to get the love. Not only do you have all of the busted energy and pretty good attackers, well, there's this new fan Rotom that's coming off, which who doesn't love a good kitchen or just regular everyday life appliance that can also do some big damage? And that's what we've got here with this fan Rotom. So the fan call ability lets you once during only your first turn search 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So you don't even have to bench them, they just come to your hand. And it doesn't denote basic either, which is pretty key. It's kind of like 100 HP Winona on a stick. And then you can't use more than one fan call ability during your turn. So you can't like scoop it up. Although, can you scoop it up and do it again? I don't think that's how it works. I think the wording
No,
lets you
because it
not
has
do it.
the actual. It's not, you can't use this ability more than once per turn. It says
Fan call.
fan call ability, so it's an effect on the player.
Good. I knew that our guests and our listeners would ask that question, so I strategically snuck it in there. Anyway, Assault Landing also is nothing to scoff at. Hey, it's basically Zapdos. If there's no stadium card in play, the attack does nothing, but it's 1 energy and it does 70 HP. So get your board set up, potentially take a KO. I mean, what's the downside, Luke? Where's the downside with this card? It's only got 1 retreat cost too. I mean, what's the downside?
The downside is that I guess you're devoting space to it. Then I guess you might be discarding a stadium. The downside is prize cards, and the downside is on your first turn. I guess sometimes you just don't got it like that, and your hand's actually bricked. Aside from that, this card's nuts. I didn't show cards here because if you've ever played against Colorless, you should know at least most of these. You just see the art and you see the HP. That's what matters here. You get to get all of these plus more as a result of this fan call. You can set up your board. You can Buddy Poffin for Fan Rotom +1. Then Fan Rotom. It's not even like an effect that plays from your hand, so you can use Buddy Poffin to get it, which is really messed up. Because if it was like from your hand onto the bench, then like at least Buddy Poffin isn't like that good for it. But now you can Buddy Puffin +1. Fan Rotom, now you can grab 3. You can go 5 wide, first off, if you really wanted to. Or you can get some of these evolutions into your hand. And it's for, like, arguably no downside. Pretty much no downside, as we've been talking about. It's nuts. It also, if it is any consolation, as if this card really needed anything else, it's got resistance. If you really hate Hitmonbros, put this thing in front of Hitmonchan and look at it just wither away. Why?
This card is obviously thought of with standard in mind, right? Like, what colorless Pokemon are you getting in standard with 100 HP or less? Not as good as the card pool that we have in GLC. And like, I know you mentioned that we're not going to talk about them, but for our listeners, like we're talking like getting your Bidoof, your Doduo, your Minccino, your Pidgeys into your Pidgeotos. Like your entire draw engines are basically set up on the first turn. And then if you're playing like Ursaluna build that I'm talking about, you might grab Teddy Ursa so you can rare candy into something going forward. I mean, it just gets you Bunnelby too if you're going to start milling your opponent from the get-go. It's just like, there's so many good colorless basics that you can grab. Now, the good thing about this card is it doesn't just slot into turbo colorless, which a lot of people kind of consider to be the best colorless build. It's going to be probably more effective in a Porygon Z build, which I think we can all agree is the more fun colorless list to play against. So there's at least that. It's going to encourage a little bit of, deck diversity amongst the colorless type. That being said, like, no other type gets to do this. Like, no other type just gets everything in one card. And so it can feel a little frustrating as I'm a fighting player being like, can I just get a draw one? Can I just get a draw one? And so there's that, but really good card, busted card. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to say much more on it. I think my face is saying it all.
For the listeners, his face says it all. All right. The next one is a good one. This is a good one. This is Crispin. And Crispin likes to cook. And you get to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards of different types. Reveal them to your opponent, put one of them into your hand, attach the other to one of your Pokemon. Not active, not bench, just any of them. And then you get to shuffle your deck. Sounds pretty good, Luke. How you Crispin?
First off, I want to say that I forgot to mention it earlier. In the Lightning in the Future slide, when I talk about Rainbow Lightning, I made that list, but Cardboard Warriors' API currently does not have Crispin on it, even a Japanese version of it. So I put Cook there. That's just before anyone says anything, it's just there as a placeholder for Crispin. It's Crispin. That's just what it is. Put Crispin in that list if you're trying it out. Please, for the love of God, do not put Cook in there. But anyways, besides the point, let's go into the actual card. I think this makes Dragon absolutely nuts. It really fixes a lot of what Dragon struggles with. Dragon, supporter-wise, really only accelerates energy with Raihan. And then trying to get Raihan stuff going. It might run a Beat or a Marnie's Pride, but that's not super consistent, or do people run it? This is different. This gets you the acceleration and the search. This gets you so many more pieces, and it's just really good. It's arguably Dragon's best friend. It's hilarious that this is a fire type Elite Four member in the games, because this got Dragon all over it. But also other decks can in fact utilize it. I mentioned it in the Rainbow Lightning list. You can use this to fetch for that one of water energy in that list to activate Lantern's Aqua Spark, and then with the acceleration from Crispin for one of the lightning or the water, you attach the other one from your hand, you Dynamotor one, well, now you're swinging 200. There are some other cards. Heatran in fire, in metal, most specifically, uses fire energy. I was really hoping we would get an Arcaludon that would use lightning energy, because that's one of its gimmicks in the actual game. And so we would have like a rainbow metal list running around. Not there yet. Hopefully TPCI is listening to me and they print it, because I think it would be a lot of fun to build that list, and this Crispin would fit right into it. But there are a lot of cards, not too many, but there's enough to warrant Crispin in those types of builds. But I definitely think this is just like the premier Dragon supporter.
Have to agree. And then, we talked about the Joltik earlier needing those grass energy. Well, now Crispin kind of helps you with that downside of including them, because now you get more synergy with what Crispin's trying to do. There's a white Kyurem that saw play in water in one of the NAIC lists that does additional damage if it has a fire energy attached, and that was a top 8 water list at one of the biggest GLC tournaments ever that was already playing that card. Well, maybe you slot Crispin to that list too to kind of help out. So there's a lot of these just have this type and add it on. And we mentioned the colorless cost too. Like right now, I'm brewing Crispin Guzzlord. Like I'm trying to figure out like how I can utilize Crispin and Guzzlord, and because you get access to like fire energy, well now you also get Mela as like an additional attachment, because a lot of those attackers, like if you're playing Foul Plays or Work, or even the Mind Jacks or Work, have colorless energy costs going on with them, so you can really benefit from that in different ways. You know, if you're playing Lightning Energy as your additional support, you get access to Volkner, which might be another out to setting up early within terms of like Buddy Buddy Poffin or Battle VIP Pass if you're going to be greedy. There's just like so many different things that this opens up. You know, if you want to get super fancy, you can play Fairy Energy. There's Mina, that's a card that exists. We've seen it in some colorless lists. Colorless gets kind of buffed a ton right now with this, especially the turbo colorless list, because if you have Crispin, that's basically another DCE, right? It's just like, hey, go find a DCE in your deck, and then you get to play Volkner in that list, which is going to give you outs to so many of your tech item cards that you're already playing, plus that energy if you need it. And then you get to play Mela too, and you're playing Turbo Energized. Like, I am worried about where Turbo Colorless is going because of this card. But it's a really fun space to explore. Like, what energies can you put into your other decks? How can you brew? How can you use other types? I think like Martial Arts Dojo doesn't say fighting Pokemon. It just says
Yep.
Pokemon that
They
has
like
fighting
fighting.
in. Yeah. So like that opens up a whole thing. Is the Snorlax going to be hitting for like 220 now because it gets the 40 extra damage? Like, it's such a cool card. It's going to do so many cool things, and at the same time, like, it's a little scary what it can do for some types.
I didn't even think about that. Oh God, please spare me. Anyways, sorry. Yeah, no. I think ultimately though, like a lot of decks can, if you don't have the energy acceleration, if you're not wanting to commit to things like a rain dancer or a dynamotor per se, or your tech just doesn't have it. I'm looking at you fighting for the most part. You have colossal, but that's hard sometimes, and you have coal and colossal, but yeah. Um, yeah, you can start running this. It's a little package. Crispin, Mela, some extra fire energies. A lot of attackers have colorless at like costs. Like you can really start making this its own little package. You really want to get the most out of it. Screw it. I mean, we can really start talking about the whole package entirely. Crispin, Mela, Giant Hearth, Welder. That's 4 cards. You're getting hell of acceleration. If you've got multiple double colorless energy requirements or whatever, you can get some really, really, really good value off of a small package just like that, including Turbo Energize and all sorts of other shenanigans. It's really good.
Yep, excited to see where it goes. A little scared. Not gonna say anything about bans. Do not think this card is anywhere close to being ban worthy. But I'm just really interested to see what people do with this card and how broken it can be in certain builds. Like this card plus Joltik is the reason why we don't have Raikou in our format right now. I know a lot of people are like, "Hey, why isn't it here? It was fine." Well, these future printings, current printings, are really what's pushing it from A to B. And so glad that Raikou's out because, I mean, this is just another way to get it going on turn 2.
You could do this in one turn with Raikou. You could get your grass energy, you can attach the metal, and then you can dynamotor the lightning, and there you go. You're swinging an amazing shot. It's it's really disgusting.
It's sick. Plus, you can search this off at Call Signal Magneton. All right. Next card. Lacey. Hey, shuffle your hand into your deck and then draw 4 cards. But if your opponent has 3 or fewer prizes, draw 8 cards instead. And that's kind of an interesting effect. Luke, where do you see this card fitting in?
I genuinely think that if this card is to see play, it's either because you greedily want a lot of cards in your hand and you're playing specifically like a control list. But then we have to run into the conversation of like, okay, what control lists are running Roxanne though? Roxanne, I would argue, is a better card. You see less cards, you see 2 less cards, but it's the same requirement in the fact that your opponent has to have 3 or fewer prizes remaining, and then you also disrupt your opponent's hand down to 2 whole cards. You're playing control. You're also manipulating. You're milling. You're doing all the shenanigans. You might be delinquenting the same turn that you're doing this, and that sucks. But you're doing all these things. Why play Lacey? We're already not playing Roxanne. It's good. It has potential if you really like the character or you want to be thematic or whatever. There you go. Run it. She's a fairy type leader, I believe, in the games. Fairy has a control list in the form of Dullstall. Go crazy, make it thematic, and run Lacey. But aside from that, why why run it if we're not already running Roxanne? And the reason why is just that 3 prize requirement to really get the full value is a very, very big downside. At least, unlike Roxanne, where you can't play it at all if your opponent doesn't have 3 or fewer, you can play Lacey. You're just going to be drawing 4, which is, it's okay. It's not great. It's okay.
Yeah, on another note, Ace Trainer is just if you're behind, it's 6 and 3, 6 for you, 3 for your opponent, and that
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
see a lot of play either. And then Cynthia's Ambition is if one of your Pokemon was knocked out, I think you draw up to 8, right? And that's just
yep.
adding cards to your hand. And those are all cards that like you
You can
might
brutal.
see. Yeah, you might see them like show up here and there in certain lists, but again, it's just like when you get to under 3 prizes, you're looking to affect the board in some way, right? Like you'd rather be Guzmaing, maybe boss stalling if you're behind and trying to find an out to what you need to do to win the game. So like, is shuffle draw going to get you there? Um, and a shuffle draw that's bad in the early game. Is that a card you want in your deck? Like people already
What?
complain about Colress, right? And
Yeah.
Colress is like shuffle draw 2 in some instances in games, and then shuffle draw 10. Well, Lacey is just always shuffle draw 4, and then sometimes is a really busted Colress. But I don't know. So I'm with you. Cool card. Play it if you feel it, but it's not for me probably.
At the end of the day, why aren't you just running Cynthia?
Facts.
Oh, you already are running Cynthia. Why aren't you running Tay and Liza?
Facts.
Okay, now we're starting to get into like these are worse shuffle draw supporters. Now we're starting to look for we're grasping at straws here. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. I don't think it's that great.
The next card I think is secretly good. I got Kofu here. And I think there's a lot of different things. First off, Claydol. Let's talk about Claydol. So Claydol's cosmic power, obviously it's an ability of a Pokemon, has been talked about as like the answer to all of fighting's problems. And it was printed in celebrations, so people are like, Mahone, unban it. Well, it was never banned because those cards aren't legal, but people are like, make an exception for this Claydol. And so it's put 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck, and then you draw until you have 6. So really, really good. And then Kofu is a supporter that does less. It's 2 cards on the bottom of your deck, and then you draw 4 cards. Which, to be fair, that Claydol was probably often that, right? 2 on the bottom, draw 4 more cards, up to 6 potentially. So I do see a lot of utility with this card, especially if you're someone who likes to play fossils. It felt like fossil Pokemon got a light ban after the Pokemon Research Lab got banned because of Archeops' sins. But, there's this whole like item printing of like Plume Fossil, and there's other fossils like Tortuga has its own specific fossil where it basically says, look at the top 7 cards of your deck and put the Pokemon you find there onto your bench. So Kofu has a little bit of synergy with these restored fossil Pokemon, which some of them has really good abilities, right? Like this Arcan could evolve into that Archeops, which stops evolutions. There's the Tortuga, I can't remember, Caracosta, I think is the evolution. This stops special energies from functioning. So like there are really strong abilities on these. They're just almost impossible to get out. So Kofu kind of gives a little bit of added consistency to those cards. It's still not great because you still have to find the supporter plus have the other card in hand. But, it's there. And I also think like if you're a deck that has some combo pieces and you're running like Professor's Research and you're looking to discard them, Kofu is a cool way to store them for later and like draw forward. So I see Kofu being utilitarian in the way that it's played, but I do think that there are specific decks that want it.
Yeah, I would like to clarify for listeners. Plume Fossil and that entire archetype is bottom of deck. Base accidentally said top of deck, but it's
Thank,
bottom of deck,
thank you
which
for
makes it
that.
significantly harder. And makes life super, super difficult for fossil players, myself included, and that's why Fossil Fighters currently is on the bench and may never see light again. But that's besides the point. Yeah, I think Kofu has some potential. There's definitely, like you said, like you can get dead cards out of your hand. You're able to see more cards. It's just overall not really, really good card advantage at all. It's like I think at most a +1, which is really rough. in regards to actual card advantage. Also, unlike Claydol said up to two. This forces you to have to do up like do two, which fighting has plenty of one hand games or one card in hand games, and it's just yeah, it's good. I think it enables this concept more. I've already been talking about cards like Dendra and Caitlyn. If you're really wanting to make this fossil concept work, Dendra, put a card from your hand to the bottom of your deck and then draw till five. Arguably better than Kofu because it's only one, but you're only drawing up until five, whereas this guarantee draws you four cards. So you can go up further than five. Caitlyn is literally just a -1. You have to put as many cards as you want from your hand on the bottom of your deck, and then you draw that many cards. So it's a matter of kind of manipulating, and you can kind of start building your hand in a particular way. But at the end of the day, you're just also RNGing on whether or not you get it off the top deck, and you have no ways of manipulating that with fighting. So that aspect of it, pretty tough. Still, if you're really wanting to go all in on the fossils, you have another out to it. Are you losing consistency on all other aspects of the game? Yes, sir. But if you don't care and you really want to turn two or even no, definitely turn two. Well, if you boost shake, turn one Archeops, by all means.
I really like this card in a deck like Ursaluna, which is a deck that I've talked about probably 3 times tonight, a deck that's been on my mind. Because with these like control strategies, you're running a lot of tech cards that aren't necessarily useful in a certain situation, but you still want to be drawing forward. And especially in a deck like Ursaluna, where you're like, I've got Teddy Ursa and I've got Rare Candy, and I need to find Ursaluna and maybe I need to get Cape, but I don't need Faba in my hand right now, but I don't want to just discard Faba. You can like keep your combo pieces in your hand while you still dig forward looking for them. And so that's kind of where I kind of envision Kofu, at least in my mind too. Like I think I'm going to try it out in Ursaluna to a certain degree. With you, I'm like, okay, is it going to be great all the time? Probably not, but like Colorless has so many draw engines. Like I'm always going to have 2 cards to put on the bottom of my deck that aren't going to be useful in that moment. So I do think like that deck is where I want it. But with, like you said, not every type's going to want it. Poor fighting. Poor fighting. That's it. That's the playable cards from Stellar Crown, at least in our opinions. I'm sure that there's maybe one that we missed or maybe one that someone's going to try and win, maybe an optimal basic here and there, but that feels like Stellar Crown. And again, I feel like the card quality was there while the quantity wasn't. But Luke, most impactful card from the set for you?
Crispin. Absolutely Crispin. It's not even a question. It's Crispin. Crispin is absolutely nuts. It opens up deck building for a lot of types. It opens up as a package consistency for a lot of maybe greedier, maybe just funnier types as well, or like archetypes of deck. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it makes it so that maybe there's a little bit more of a shakeup. But you really got to think about it when you're making the decisions to put Crispin into your list.
So I might actually put, for me anyway, and this kind of leads to the next one, I might put Crispin as most played from this set, just because it does find its way into a number of different brews, where I feel like Rotom Fan might actually sneakily be the most impactful, because Colorless has kind of been on what feels like a downward slide since fighting has gotten a little bit better. And I feel like Rotom Fan is just going to be like, we can set up faster now than fighting can punch us in the face. And so I think for me anyway, at the moment, most impactful is Rotom Fan. But I don't know. Again, I just feel like Crispin's really good. It's going to get played. It's going to see play almost everywhere. What's your most played? Is it Crispin still?
It's definitely still Crispin, but assuming that I say not Crispin, um, the other Crispin, Joltik. And if not Joltik, then honestly, if people really start giving like an elusive feather style build a try and they really try with that Ledian, I think they're gonna find some like fun with it. And it might not be the most played, but definitely most played for the archetype, like for the type in general. I think it'd be really, really great if people started looking into that because it might be like sleeper really good.
Well, overhyped card. Do you have anything that you feel particularly feels overhyped from this set?
Aside from like the two cards you picked,
You mean the
yeah, I
really
think
good ones?
yeah, the really good ones. I mean, overhyped because I've seen it all over the place. It's definitely bolts for me. We're just not there yet. We're close. We're just not there yet.
I'm a little bit of a hot take here from me. Again, you say what you will about Bolt. I'm gonna play it, and I'm gonna love playing it. So I love that you hate Bolt. It makes me more emboldened. I feel like it is now my one job. I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna 3-0 my locals with Raging Bolt. Just to prove you wrong. So I feel good about this. I feel good about this. I hope other people that are Raging Bolt lovers out there, go do it. Send Luke a pic. He'll love it. Tag him on Twitter. But for me, the overhyped card is Joltik. I mean, I know you said it was one of the most played cards, but like Turbo Energize doesn't see play in these Lightning lists. It saw play in Raikou lists, but it didn't see play in any of those other lists. And now you effectively have double Turbo Energize that gives up a cheap prize. Like, yes, but like you could just be setting up your Dynamotors instead, right? Like your Dynamotors were effectively 2 extra energy attachments on the second turn of the game. If you just focus more on getting your Dynamotors out and attaching on the first turn, that's 1 less, but you don't give up a prize as easily. So I'm going to say overhyped is Joltik, kind of to be contrarian to a certain degree, but I do think that card, it just doesn't feel as good without Raikou, and I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to a certain extent. It's just, I think people can start cracking it and making it do other things than just like that package. Having the potential of not needing turbo energizing your hand while still running that redundancy might be low-key kind of broken, but we have to kind of see.
I'm just really wondering how often people are going to want to Joltik first turn over turn 1 Zapdos you. And that's where like that role has felt filled. And like even if you're playing the spread deck now, you've got Raichu in your deck and you have an option to maybe get, the spread going early. Are you opting to not set up, something else to spread over Joltik? I don't know. It's just like maybe Joltik can help you get a flying flip earlier just because that double colorless attack cost. But it just feels like I want to be doing something else than Joltik, but I feel like I could be wrong.
If you don't run if you don't want to run Zapdos, I think that just makes you less of a degenerate because you're not going for turn 1 donks, and that's perfectly fine. And also, I understand you. Personally, I want to win sometimes, so I have the card there, and it fixes up some very interesting math, but to each their own. I think if you don't want to and you want to run this, all the power to you.
I will say, like, I think in spread, you have to run that Zapdos to get rid of bench barrier, right? Like, counter catcher up, the bench barrier, and Zapdos it. So, I don't like to donk either, personally. So, maybe Joltik is a way for me to stop doing that. But, yeah, you do need it for the bench barrier sometimes. I feel like the set's good. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens. With all of that being said, Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, talking about Stellar Crown, all of your wonderful cards, and of course the best card in the set being Raging Bolt. Again, I know how you feel about that card. It's just been great having this discussion with you. Thanks for being on.
No, 100%. Thank you so much for having me. It's a little shorter than last time because less cards, but hopefully everyone enjoyed the conversations that we had amongst each other and the set review overall.
I know I did. Well, thank you again, Luke, and thanks to all our listeners out there. Again, this has been Let Loose, the podcast dedicated to all things Gym Leader Challenge and the Pokemon TCG. We'll see you all next week. Good night.